Hi everyone, I'm Tim Riker, Chair of the Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and welcome back. This is our virtual speaker series. You've already heard our first speaker, and today we have a second presenter. Her name is Olivia Williams. Olivia is the administrator of the Options Program at the Fogarty Center in Barrington, Rhode Island. And today she'll be interviewed by Bunmi Osho. Bunmi is one of our commissioners at the Rhode Island Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. We're really looking forward to this interview.
Hello, my name is Bunmi Osho. I am a member of the Rhode Island Commission and Hard of Hearing, Rhode Island. I'm one of the commissioners. Good morning and welcome to this interview session.
So my name is Olivia Williams, and I was born and raised in Rhode Island, and I am currently working at the Fogarty Center in Barrington, Rhode Island as an administrator for Options. And this is my first job just because I graduated with my master's degree in May in professional studies in communications, management, and human resource development, as well as graduating with my bachelor's degree in psychology and advertising from Rochester Institute of Technology.
Wow, amazing. So when you said May, is that May 2020?
Yes, May 2020 for my master's and 2018 for my bachelor's.
Wow, that must be very challenging in the middle of the pandemic.
Yes, it was.
How was your graduation, if I may ask? Did you have a graduation party?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Did you have a graduation party?
No, I didn't. I actually, my twin sister who's hearing, she graduated at the same time with her master's, so I decided to celebrate her instead because she didn't have a graduation party for her bachelor's. And so I just kind of wanted to celebrate her instead of myself because I walked at RIT in May of 2019 early, so I wouldn't have to walk in 2020, and I ended up being very lucky. And and I also completed my master's entirely online.
Wow, amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So as a Black person, or as a Black Indigenous person of color and deaf, what has your journey been like in your education? Because you've been through so many ladders of education. Well, how would you describe your journey?
So honestly, with my journey, being a deaf person, but being a person of color, and it was, I had a good upbringing in my journey, growing up deaf with cochlear implants, but it was definitely tricky when I was completing my education. I went to Lincoln School in Providence, and I went there for 10 years. And it's a college preparatory school, and I was one of the few students who were like students of color, and I back then did not understand why, because I started when I was 10 years old, and I was still catching up socially and academically on the grade level I was supposed to be at in 4th grade, but I was functioning as if I was maybe like 6 years old because I was still learning how to process language comprehension, reading, and writing. So that during that time from 4th grade, I would say to 8th grade, that was a tough time in my life because I knew I was deaf. Like I was happy that I had cochlear implants, but also I was proud that I was deaf and I was never ashamed. But being a person of color, I mean, I have been bullied in the past just for like not having the latest shoes, like pair of shoes that somebody else might have, and I would get the same pair but not the brand version, for example, and I wouldn't understand why. So with my sister, because she also attended the same school as me, she would have to defend me and say, you know, they were bullying you because you don't have the shoes that they're wearing. And I said, well, I don't understand that. I said, well, I don't know why they have to be mean. Is it just because like I don't have like that money or something? And she's like, they think that, but you don't have to have what they have. Like everyone's different. And I said, okay, that's fair. So as I got older, when high school hit, I became more aware of my like what's going on like trend wise. You know, in our generation everyone likes to have the same thing, and in high school I stopped doing that. I became more aware of that, and I wasn't bullied in high school personally. I became more involved in a lot of clubs on campus, but I also was the type of person where in my specifically with my classmates there were very few of us who identify as a student of color. And you know, in Lincoln School, like they are known to be in, like all white, and that's always been that way since forever. But with my classmates, I did not have a lot of friends just because I chose to be more of an introvert growing up, and I've always been introverted, not just because I'm deaf, but that's just my personality too. So it was hard to talk with my friends about like some things because I feel like they wouldn't understand a deaf person's mentality, but also like if I'm talking about something that my deaf friends would understand, my hearing friends wouldn't understand. So I did struggle with that for a little bit in high school, but then I had to tell myself I need to stop caring what other people think, especially being someone who was Black and half Puerto Rican. So after that, going to college, it was a lot easier for me because no one cares in college. And I was like, well, I need to hopefully find that diverse group of friends. I went to Stonehill College first before I transferred to RIT my junior year, but at Stonehill, because it was such a small college, I was able to find a small, diverse group of friends easily, as well as being the only deaf student with cochlear implants. And I immediately was given the services I needed and did not struggle, but I ended up transferring just because of the academics at RIT and how the professors were able to accommodate their deaf students like much better than Stonehill did. But I still enjoyed my time at Stonehill, specifically with the social piece, because I needed to make sure that like others would understand me and my deafness, but also just like I'm half Black and half Puerto Rican. They didn't care, but they accepted me for me. And like versus in high school, it was way different because people are still figuring themselves out. But in college, we are still doing that. But I figured myself out by then. So
Wow.
it was a good journey, but I learned a lot of things throughout that.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. What are the biggest challenges you have noticed in your community, the Black, Indigenous, people of color, deaf, and hard of hearing? What, like, in terms of job, self-identity? I know you mentioned some things like that in your school journey. So in the community at large, what have you noticed?
I'm trying to think of a good one. Well, in my education, it wasn't, it was a little bit different, but I will say during graduate school, during my master's degree, when I was finishing up, I was in the process of applying to jobs, and I understood completely that it was going to be hard because I'm a young individual just getting out of graduate school, and I'm 25 years old, and they expect, you know, someone with the master's to come to be prepared at 23 maybe, but not 25. But with me applying to jobs, I was prepared because of the pandemic. I was already prepared to have everything be slowed down, or companies going on a hiring freeze. But with my frustrations, I was more worried about the the application process online, where I don't know if you guys like know this, but in an application, when they ask you about the demographics, like male, female, are you Black, are you white, are you Asian, or whatever, I would just say, okay, it would say I'm Black, but then if I scroll down, if it said 2 or more races, I would click that instead because I do identify as 2 races. Well, I have a couple more in my blood, but yeah, I would click that because I know I identify as 2 races, not just one. But then when I scroll down to the next question, they'll ask, are you Hispanic or Latino? I'm like, okay, yes, I am, but I already stated that I am 2 or more races. And then when the last question, when they ask about the voluntary, no, what's the, it's like an agreement form about talk about disability. Is it voluntary? I don't remember. It's like a whole official title, but they would talk about like, oh, if you have a disability, like check it, like they're not going to discriminate anyone like based on if you have a disability or not. And for myself, I was definitely struggling with that because I personally felt like if I put yes, I wouldn't be considered at all. I wouldn't get my resume wouldn't be looked at, my application wouldn't be looked at either. So I struggled with that because I said, yes, I'm not ashamed to be deaf. Like I'm not ashamed to be a person of color, but still, like I felt like I was going to be judged right away for no reason. So, and I understand companies have a lot of applicants. I get it. But at the same time, I just don't want to be judged. So with that question, with future applications, I started writing, I do not wish to answer, because if I saw a difference in that, then I would be able to compare both. So I said yes to a couple of applications, but then I did it, for example, I'm going to give a really good example, actually. I applied for a job at Boston Children's Hospital 2 months ago. I put, I do not wish to answer. I got an interview 3 days later. I was shocked to see that. I was like, oh, okay. So me pressing that option shows that like I'm not being judged. They don't know me. So I ended up doing that interview and I disclosed my deafness and I told them, I was a former patient and I want to give back. Like I really want to give back to this hospital who changed my life. And they immediately were taken back, but they were so surprised, but they were also like happy about that too. They're like, thank you for letting us know, like that's amazing about your story, and like you speak so well. And I said thank you. So some people can not tell because my implants, you can't see them like facing me, but I felt good when I disclosed my deafness. And after that, I will say they never ended up hiring anyone, and the job is still online, but I got this opportunity instead here at the Fogarty Center, and it was mainly through connections. So there were executives who knew me personally and also knew my mother personally. So I told them I'll send an application, whatever. Sent it, got the job, and now I'm here. And I'm loving it so far. It's more in the HR field. So with that, I feel completely accepted here versus like other jobs that like offered an interview but then never went through because I understood they had so many applicants. So being a person of color, like it's just hard sometimes when you have that option specifically on those applications, as well as clicking an option if you have a disability or not.
Amazing. As we all know, the COVID-19, we heard, and for someone that is actually a Black person, of color, Indigenous person, the COVID-19, we know the impacts on our community as a whole. How do you think it has affected the Black, Indigenous, people of color, deaf, and hard of hearing? Because being Black and Indigenous is another thing. You're hearing, you can access resources out there, you can do stuff, but Black and then hard of hearing, how would you say it has impacted, the pandemic has impacted that community?
I think with COVID-19, at first, we all thought it was going to be okay, but then it got a lot worse, and a lot of people had to lose their jobs, unfortunately, or just a lot of companies going on hiring freezes. But with COVID-19 impacting, people of color who are specifically deaf and hard of hearing, the masks have been extremely difficult for all of us. And for me, I was pushed when I was younger, I was pushed to learn how to listen. And I use that as my tool. And that's the purpose of me having a cochlear implant. Like, I wanted to hear, and I told myself, if I have to wear a mask, I have to make sure I'm listening, so I understand, because I don't want to rely on someone every single time. Like, I'm intermediate in ASL, so if I see a friend who has to wear a mask too, but can use ASL, I'll try to accommodate with them, like say, hey, I can sign with you, but my eyebrows would just have to show it, like show my expressions. And my eyes too. But they were okay with that. But at the same time, like, I've had a lot of questions asked. Like, I actually work at a part-time job with Lululemon, and when I applied for that job, they immediately hired me because they already liked me for some reason. But they asked me about the mask. They said, how's that going to affect you? And I was personally, I'm like one of the 2 people at my current store who identify as a person of color. And I told them, wearing a mask is difficult for me, but I'm not going to let that be a burden on me. But for others, it might be, but everyone is different. So with myself, I told them I can wear a mask and be fine for 5-6 hours. I can do it. But I told them handling, for example, like the cash register, if there's too many guests in the store, then that would be difficult because you have to ask for their email or phone number. And I told myself, I'm not ashamed, but it would just be really awkward for me to repeat a lot. Like, oh, can you repeat your email again? Oh, can you repeat your, like, this is me, like, going like this if I have to listen. And that's just too much. So my boss actually was accommodating. She's like, I won't put you a cash. Let's do that. I won't put you a cash right now because I understand it's hard for you. So she did that. And then also when a guest speaks to me, I just asked them, can you please speak a little bit louder and a little slower so I can help you with whatever you need, as well as if they need something hemmed, I had like a small whiteboard and I just wrote for hemming needs, like just write down your name, phone number, and email address. That's it. And they were able to use that without asking why. And I appreciated it a lot. So working with Lululemon has definitely helped me like be more aware of what I need for like working at the Fogarty Center. And coming here, the one thing I'm struggling with is the phone. So I don't use the phone here right now. I'm in the process of getting a caption call phone.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, and I need that definitely because the phones here are they're older, but also it's so much hard for me to just put the phone up like this because with my cochlear implants, I use Bluetooth now on my cell phone. And that makes me like relieved that I can hear anyone on my personal phone clearly with the Bluetooth. But with this phone here, it is extremely difficult for me. Even though we're not seeing each other, it's still hard for me. So when this new phone comes in, it'll be a lot easier for me to speak with clients, especially with the captions coming up. So that's something I definitely need, because imagine if I was working somewhere else during this pandemic and they would not accommodate me, then what's the point of me working with you if I can't be accommodated? So
Sure.
I think it's affected a lot of people, like with phones, masks, and well, getting a job, yes. I mean, that's been difficult for everyone in general, but I would say specifically the masks have been the biggest struggle for like people who identify as a person of color, but also everyone. And I've had people ask me, oh, you can just wear a mask that's the clear mask. And I told them, I can wear that, but you won't wear one. So what's the point? So I just laugh at them like, do you realize that you're still not going to help me out? So
Yeah.
I actually called out on Lululemon because they came out with clear masks as well, but it was manufactured really badly. And I even tried it on and I said, it's fogging here and it's not the metal like bridge part is not manufactured correctly. And I had to tell whoever was in charge and say, I'm a person who's deaf, and I'm sure you don't really have a lot of deaf or hard of hearing people at any of your stores, but this is a really poorly made mask and I will not wear this, and I will not allow my coworkers to wear that if I can't see what they're saying, if it's going to fog up. And my boss took it. She told like whoever was in charge, and she said, thank you for speaking up. Because she said, I don't know if there's another deaf person or hard of hearing person who works at any of the stores across the US,
Mm.
but like I'm sure you're like the only one who probably brought this up. And I said, yes, because I understand. I said, hearing people may not understand that, but I get it. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Wow. 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 It is so amazing. Wow. So right now, Rhode Island doesn't have any organization for, there's Rhode Island Association for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, but there's none specific to um, Black, Indigenous people of color, deaf, and hard of hearing. Do you think having one will be beneficial in the state of Rhode Island?
I mean, it would take some time to establish, but I think it'd be beneficial because I do personally know a lot of deaf and hard of hearing people who identify as a person of color who I actually attended like preschool with from the School for the Deaf, and they're always like, for example, I was in a class of 2014 at Lincoln, and I volunteered at the School for the Deaf during the school year once a week, and I would always see the senior class who I went to preschool with, and they were always together. They were the most diverse group I've ever met, in my opinion. And even after they graduated high school, they would always stick together, but then they're always asking, we want to meet other people like us, but like be diverse too. And I said, okay, I see what you mean, because I don't know anyone else like besides that one group. So I mean, I would reach out to them too and be like, hey, what do you guys think? Doing meetups or something like that, like teaching each other something. Like most of them use ASL, some actually speak. And for me, I'm intermediate in ASL. Like I can use it as soon as someone starts signing to me in person, I can pick it up and kind of understand. But I would love to learn more in the future. So I would want to go to those people and say, hey, teach me a couple more signs or something, and then I'll teach you whatever they don't know about me that I can do as a deaf person. So I think it would be great to establish, but during this time it's obviously tricky. But it would definitely be beneficial for us to be able to connect and network too.
Awesome, awesome. So on a state level, at the Rhode Island Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, how can we as an organization strengthen our relationship with the Black, Indigenous people of color, deaf and hard of hearing, in terms of communication, communication access, support resources, and in so many other ways? In what ways, let me just put it simple, in what ways can we support you guys?
So that's a little bit of a tricky question to answer because I can't gather all my thoughts right away on this one, but I would say strengthening our relationship. I think resources are like helpful to start out with because, for example, me finding a job in Rhode Island, I personally was trying to find a job like in Massachusetts, and I wanted to try to like go somewhere else because I know I'm very independent. But I told myself, you know what, I'll stay in Rhode Island for now because this pandemic, and I'd rather be home safe. So, with the resources, especially getting a job as a person like me, half Black, half Puerto Rican, finding a job, it was tricky, but like having some resources on how to not be like how not to feel fear, like how to not, you don't want to fear over getting a job because you might be Black or you might be Puerto Rican, Dominican, it doesn't matter. But like we want to make sure that we can not be judged on that. So we want to have that support by you guys to reassure us that we can do it, but also have backup. So like if we needed a reference or something, we can always contact you guys because we can get to know you. But also we know we have someone at state level to like speak on behalf of us and know that we have that support. So I think that's something that would be great for young adults and older adults too, but especially with teenagers who are applying for college. They need a what's the word? A letter of recommendation, a letter of recommendation for college, and they don't know anyone who understands them on a personal level and academically. You guys can be a resource because like there is going to be someone else who's deaf and hard of hearing, and they understand how a deaf person or a hard of hearing person feels versus a hearing person. They don't understand how we feel sometimes. They really don't. And like it's like I said earlier, when I'm with my deaf friends, I can be completely myself because we get each other. But with my hearing friends, I'll say some things and they'll look at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, oh, they don't get it. They really don't get it. I see why now. So having someone else who's like deaf or hard of hearing at working at state level, if they can support that teenager, you know, apply for that college that they want to go to, then they'll have that support too. So education wise, that would be a huge help, and also professionally. And on a personal level, like communication and stuff, like it would be nice to have resources in general for any like technology access that we may not know of. So for example, with this phone that I'm getting, I found out through Denise, I forgot her last name, but she informed me that this phone was available for me at no cost for my office, and I didn't even know that. And I said, wow, I would love to have those resources too for home, and not just for work, but for home too. So anything with communication access, I want that to be advertised too for anybody who might be looking for something, even for a cell phone. So yeah.
Thank you. My next question, which is getting to the last one, not the last, but do you have any advice, or is there something you would like to share with the Black, Indigenous people of color and hard of hearing? Because obviously from this interview, I've seen your level of education, and you talk about volunteering at the School for the Deaf. And I know that there are so many young people out there that have no sense of direction at all whatsoever. So give us some advice.
It's definitely, I mean, like I said, everybody's different and they're raised differently too. So I'm not going to share this just for young adults or older adults. I'm going to do this for teenagers too, because teenagers go through a lot when they're deaf and hard of hearing. They go through so much in their life, like trying to accept themselves. And I want them to know that you have to accept yourself, because you can't hear, and you're not going to hear for the rest of your life. So you have to be grateful that you can still access, you know, having an education, having the opportunity to go to college, and having that support by those who understand you personally and academically, and especially with the academics, because, you know, I do have friends who are deaf and hard of hearing who I went to school with in the past, and they've literally told me to my face, I'm not going to college because my guidance counselor believes that I'm too stupid and I can't go to school. That was over 6 years ago, and I was shocked to hear that. And I said, we went to preschool together and we graduated the same year, and I'm going to a school that I'm the only deaf student, and these group of students have that potential. And actually 2 of them ended up at RIT with me, and I saw them all the time and they were doing just fine. But the other group of students that graduated with them, they didn't feel like they had that chance because they were not given that support from their guidance counselor at the time. So I was just upset by that. So I want them to know that academically, just know that you can do anything. We might write differently, we might process things differently, it is a fact. I get it. But don't let that take you back and tell yourself, oh, I can't go to college because I'm just not smart enough. They are smart. They are very smart. And they need to be reassured about that as they get older, because some people really don't support deaf and hard of hearing people at all. They really don't. So I want them to know that they're in power. They have that power to prove that they can do anything. I got a master's. I'm sure somebody was like, oh, she got a master's. Like, oh, does she struggle because she's deaf? And I tell people I did it entirely online too. And people learn differently. Like, I personally do better online versus in class. That's just my opinion. But I was the only deaf student in my graduating class for my program. And the coordinator believed in me. He understood me because he got to know me personally, also knowing my struggles with having auditory processing disorder too. So I process things a little bit slower, but then eventually I understand. So with these students growing up as a teenager, going to high school, going into college, they just need to get that reminder saying you need to accept yourself no matter what. Be proud that you're deaf or hard of hearing, even if you don't have a cochlear implant hearing aid or whatever. But just know that you are in power. You can prove to those whoever thought negatively of you, prove to them that you can do what you wanted to do and go from there. Because if you don't do that, then you're just gonna keep telling yourself you're a failure. You're not. So they need to be reassured that they can do anything they can do. Just because they can hear, they can do it. So I've told everyone that. I said, just because I can hear doesn't mean I can do what you're doing. And they just look at me like I'm crazy and they'll laugh it off. And I said, no, I'm actually being serious. Like, look at me. I got a master's degree and I worked my butt off for that. And I've had all that support from my parents, my sister, and also friends who I attended college with. And at the end, it was worth it. So I want those people to understand that they're worth it and that they'll have that support in the future. But also professionally, don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid to disclose your deafness. But everyone's different in that field, because with me, I prefer to disclose my deafness after I get hired. And so after I get hired, I'm good to go, because if I'm just in the interview process, I get that feeling too. But I'm sure other deaf and hard of hearing people feel that way, especially if they're a person of color. I'm sure they feel that way. You have a choice, do what you want, but at the same time, I just wait till after I'm hired, and then I tell them I'm deaf, but I just need this accommodation, and then I'll be okay. That's all I need. I can do everything else. I just need more accommodations for like my phone, and then I'm good to go. Okay, that's fine, no problem. We'll get started on that. People have to understand who are not, especially those who identify as a person who's not Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, doesn't matter. Like, they have to understand that. So, and also not discriminate, because if they try to do that, you have proof. Just letting you know that. So yeah, just in overall, you have the power to do whatever you want, but don't let people bring you down.
Good. Thank you so much. So that brings us to the end of the interview. I really appreciate your time, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, you've just seen Olivia Williams and her interview. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned a lot. We're not finished yet, though. We do have more. So look for our third interview coming up soon.